Ranting! Incoming ranting is all I have to say. Just want to give you a warning. We are really digging into it today, so I hope that's what you're hungry for. Welcome back to Dragon Ball Dissection. When we last left off, Dragon Ball Super decided to subvert our expectations by having a showdown between Gohan and Shisami begin with the world's most bloodless impalement. And the impaler? It's Tagoma! Okay, so who is Tagoma? Leading up to the release of the original Resurrection F movie, the marketing team hyped up Toriyama's involvement. He wrote the script. He redesigned characters like Sorbet and Tagoma. However, appearing prominently on the poster doesn't necessarily mean a character actually does anything. And perhaps building up that connection just builds undeserved expectations. Sadly, the most interesting thing about movie Tagoma is that he wears a scouter that covers both eyes. He accompanies Sorbet on his Dragon Ball hunt and is the one to suggest they can just regenerate Frieza's slice-and-dice body. Suggesting things is his downfall, though. When Frieza returns all in one piece and immediately starts acting all Wrath of Khan, Tagoma realizes he's seen that movie and politely suggests that maybe they just rebuild their empire rather than throw away their lives on pointless revenge. Frieza responds by throwing him through the spaceship and he's just dead a little over 15 minutes into the movie. What a character. The series version of Resurrection F appropriately resurrects Tagoma's character. Rather than being the polite, helpful yes man of the movie, he is almost immediately established as someone skeptical of reviving Frieza. He rightly wonders if Frieza won't just be a petty dictator who lords over them. He even flashes back to a moment during the old days where he once spotted Frieza and the others from a distance, framed so that he is positioned far below them. Tagoma is presented as having been a cog in the machine, distant from the romanticized past. The rulers of yore never did anything for him, so why should he stick his neck out for them now? Especially if said ruler is more likely to prioritize his own needs over their armies. That ultimately provides a lot more context for Tagoma, still politely, speaking out against Frieza's stupid plan. This time around, Frieza does not immediately kill him. Instead, he tortures him, knocking out all of his limbs one at a time, a la Piccolo to Goku. And when Frieza realizes he's going to need to actually train to get good, he decides to use Tagoma as his training dummy. It turns out it's actually far worse than that. Frieza wants to bring Son Goku right to the brink of death without actually killing him, so he uses Tagoma to basically test the threshold of life and death. We don't see much of it, but Frieza repeatedly beats Tagoma to within an inch of his life, and then heals him up to do it all over again. It's worth noting Frieza uses the same medical machines to heal Tagoma that Tagoma had suggested using to put Frieza's body back together again. In other words, Tagoma is being tortured by the same machines that facilitated the circumstances that led to him being tortured. It's actually one of the more violently evocative ideas Dragon Ball has ever come up with. Suffice it to say, surviving this ordeal while training with Frieza has indeed made him stronger. Sorbet even points out that Tagoma's surpassed the Ginyu. But it's fair to say the experience has sent his little choo-choo round the bend, hence shooting Shisami in the back solely because it presented a tactical opportunity to get to Gohan. He's also completely drunk Frieza's Kool-Aid. No longer is he concerned about the whims of a petty dictator. He now sees that a strong man is exactly what keeps the less worthy in check. He even says he realized that those who rule must display icy ruthlessness and instill overwhelming fear. In other words, Frieza has beaten the phrase might makes right into every fiber of Tagoma's being, and now Tagoma knows exactly what to do to rise in the ranks in a system like that. I have to say, I love this. What a concept to show a fairly pragmatic workaday clock puncher in proximity to evil fall off the deep end to sadistically embrace its most vile excesses. It's not that Tagoma wasn't evil before. He's willfully been part of Frieza's army. Just following orders isn't an excuse, but there's clearly been a significant shift in what he values. I always find painfully compelling the idea of the cycle of violence, of how victims cope with their trauma by becoming victimizers themselves. Systems of oppression are so ingrained that even the people who are hurt by them will champion them. After all, it's better than being on the losing side, right? It's deliciously, uncomfortably evil and horrifyingly true to life in a way that Dragon Ball rarely, if ever, examines. I have always been impressed by Dragon Ball Super invoking this idea, and I always planned to devote quite a bit of time to him. But I didn't plan this. It was back in January that I was re-watching these episodes in order to prepare for covering this arc in Dragon Ball Dissection. I swear I am not making this up. Literally the same day I re-watched Tagoma go off on his unhinged screed about how rulers should rule him harder, daddy, it was all over the news that U.S. Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller had been quoted as saying, "We live in a world that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power." And the best part is, not only does he talk like a Dragon Ball villain, I realized he looks exactly like Tagoma. You gotta admit, that's just wacky. Now, I know some of you don't like when I bring current affairs into Dragon Ball Dissection, but if you're bothered by it, take comfort in the fact that I'm done making that brief comparison because in the time it took me to make it, Tagoma has permanently exited the story. And believe me, I have a lot more to say about that. Because Dragon Ball Super came up with the most interesting and deepest concept it's ever had, a concept that is both narratively and ethically exciting, only for it to serve as a dash of flavor in order to bring back Captain Ginyu. No, I'm not joking about that. Adapting a movie that is already marinating in fan service, the series version decides to add a little more when the frog Ginyu seizes on the opportunity of Frieza's return to take Tagoma's body for himself. Yeah, that's what Sorbet's line about him having outpaced the Ginyu is for. That's the whole point of Frieza building up and breaking Tagoma. It's not in service to his character, it's in service to a character who, at the point of this airing, hadn't contributed anything to the story in over 20 years. And I can tell you right now that he does not contribute anything to this story. I am absolutely blown away by how stupid this is. How could anybody look at the character they had created in Tagoma only to decide that bringing back Captain Ginyu was more important? I don't even know how to describe this. Tagoma starts as a design. It's hyped up enough that his role in the movie as a pointless grunt is disappointing. They get a second chance with him. They turn him into the most interesting concept in this entire failed premise of a story, hyping up what grand potential a character like this could have, and then never actually do anything with him. How many layers of disappointment is that now? Was that their goal? To challenge themselves to see how pathetically pointless they could make this one minor character? I don't think anything in Dragon Ball has left my jaw on the floor for all the wrong reasons like this decision does. Certainly the absolute waste of potential is what's worst about this. If they had had some meaningful or interesting story to tell with Ginyu, I still would have been disappointed at the bait and switch, but maybe I could appreciate it for what it is. But I haven't even touched on how much they have to bend over the mechanics of Dragon Ball lore to make this stupid idea work in the first place. Remember Ginyu? Remember how his shtick works? He calls out the word change in English, and that allows him to swap bodies with his target. The animated continuity, both the Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Kai versions, make it crystal clear that that is not something he can do if he lacks the ability to speak. Bluma has to literally make a frog translating collar in order for the frog Ginyu to steal her body. And we know that's in play here because the series references it. So, with all of that established, how is the frog Ginyu able to change bodies with Tagoma? Well, he hops over to Tagoma, writes the alien word for change in the dirt, and Tagoma reads it aloud. What? Ginyu doesn't have to say the word himself? All that has to happen is for someone to say it in his proximity? Are we saying that when Ginyu had traded bodies with Goku, that Goku could have just said change and immediately gotten his body back? Does it only happen when Ginyu wants it to? Or was there an awkward day at Ginyu HQ when Gerdo walked in to explain, "Sorry I'm late for work, boss. My tire was flat and I had to change it." On top of that, the characters claim Ginyu is even stronger in Tagoma's body than Tagoma was. Jocko adds that he drew out the power of Tagoma because that's just how Ginyu is. I don't know if you remember the Ginyu story, but being able to tap into a body's power better than its owner is pretty much the opposite of what Ginyu is known for. Now, I don't want to be annoyingly pedantic. Certainly to a point I can accept bending of the rules if the story or emotional payoff is worth it. Here, the bending is exceptionally silly, and the results don't come close to being worth it. Another potential problem that I'm at least a bit more sympathetic towards is the idea that Ginyu, or even Pilaf and his ilk, shouldn't even be alive, given that bad people weren't supposed to be resurrected at the end of the Buu arc. I can give this one a bit more leeway because that's always been such a squishily defined wish. What counts as truly evil? Who can actually ride the Kintoon? Stuff like that feels pretty vibes-based. Even within its own context, it receives pushback, as Goku feels the need to comment on Vegeta being included by Shenlong as a not really evil person. So I've definitely heard people defend Pilaf etc.'s revival as attributable to them being too comedically incompetent to be evil. And on a similar note, I could claim that Ginyu, having been a frog many years, has not had any opportunity to do anything evil for a long enough time to count. Do I find those excuses particularly compelling? Not especially. But given that, to me, an Earth full of perfect people sounds pretty boring for story purposes, I'm willing to err on the side of Shenlong interpreting evil pretty narrowly. And if that doesn't do it for you, I find it more compelling to simply accept the precedent that if Vegeta can squeak by a few days after murdering a stadium full of innocent bystanders, then the long-dormant Pilaf and Ginyu should easily make it through. But like it or not, Ginyu is here. For an episode. So worth it. Let's at least see what the show does with it. And even though we don't get to see Ginyu in a familiar body, and even though Ginyu is voiced by his Kai actor instead of his original actor, which means it's not even my nostalgia they're pandering to, he does provide a little bit of levity, a little bit of chemistry with Frieza. There. I said something nice. Gohan quickly beats him up though, and then he spares Ginyu, which pisses Frieza off. In fact, it downright triggers him. That's something else I like. I can definitely understand why Frieza, after all he's been through, would find mercy humiliating by proxy, especially carried out by a son of Son. This, however, is accompanied by way too many flashbacks. This whole episode is filled to the brim with them. At any rate, that sets Frieza off, and he decides to take his anger out on Gohan, picking away at him not too dissimilarly to how he picked at Tagoma. But then, for the killing blow, Piccolo jumps in the way, sacrificing himself for Gohan yet again. So, we have a macro story about nostalgic fanservice. We swap out a compelling new character for nostalgic fanservice. And while we're still in the middle of that, we repeat an exact beat of nostalgic fanservice. But here's the wild thing. Piccolo doesn't die in the movie. And frankly, that kind of breaks my brain. It's not that a character dies in one continuity and lives in another. That's fine. But in this case, it just doesn't sit right with me. Part of it ties into what I said in my What is Super video. In fact, I even addressed this directly then. It's my Schrodinger's Piccolo. Given the haphazard and incomplete adaptational style of the various forms of Dragon Ball Super, it's hard to know sometimes what applies to what continuity. Remember that the Dragon Ball Super manga does not adapt this story at all. And even if you assume that Toyotaro's Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F promotional manga is in continuity with the Dragon Ball Super manga, which I don't necessarily assume, it doesn't tell the complete story. It cuts off before the end because, it's promotional fluff for the movie rather than a serious pillar of this series. And true, it goes far enough for us to know that Piccolo doesn't die in the same manner or the same timing as he does here. But just the fact that it could be a question at all is wacky. Whether a character lives or dies should be worth more than a shrug. And that's actually my bigger issue here. The Dragon Ball Super television series writing this death into the story at all tips their hand just a bit too much. It's no secret that the existence of Dragon Balls always threatens to make death feel like a minor inconvenience, which is a problem when you're trying to write drama. A story should have drama. Death is one of the most dramatic things there is, because it's so permanent. Genre fiction often undoes that permanence, which can cause invoking death to feel cheap. I've talked about this before. Everybody has. In Dragon Ball's best moments, Toriyama would come up with obstacles that put those eventual wish-granting happy endings in jeopardy, such as the characters having to go to a danger-filled new planet to get new Dragon Balls. Ultimately, we all know things are going to turn out okay. But it's like a magic trick. You know it's not real, but if the journey is compelling, you're willing to overlook that. And if the showmanship is strong, you're willing to believe the unbelievable. Piccolo's death here is like a magician who doesn't bother with any artistry, who doesn't hide the cards up his sleeve, who doesn't disguise the trick mirrors, who tells you up front exactly how every trick is going to work, and then laughs at you for expecting it to be compelling. It's clear to me the writers of Dragon Ball Super wanted more stakes than the movie, which had pretty much no stakes at all. Having Frieza actually kill a major character makes him less of a paper tiger, but they also know it's an extremely safe thing to do. They're just inserting this into an already existing story, and the status quo has to be back to what it's supposed to be by the end. So Piccolo dies, so Gohan can be sad, and a few episodes later, he comes back to life as if he never died at all. There's no fuss, no muss. It contributes almost nothing to the story, and it tells me they know exactly what they're doing. What's an easy way to add drama? Have someone die. It doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to have any consequences. It doesn't even have to match other versions of this story because it can so easily be slotted in or slotted out that you'll never even notice the difference. In a few episodes, all the pieces will be reset as though it never happened. It reads to me as so cynical. We're at the point that a major character shuffling off this mortal coil has become filler. And they don't even care enough anymore to try to hide it. So Piccolo has taken the bullet for Gohan. Frankly, this is the least of my problems, but I don't know how he even manages it given that Ginyu is last shown blocking all of Gohan's friends from interceding on his behalf. Whatever, I guess it's another reason why Ginyu is a complete waste here. So, beyond forcing out the sads, is there any purpose to this Piccolo stuff? Kinda. This is another one of those stories where Goku and Vegeta this time, are late to the party and everyone else has to deal with it. During some cutaways, we see Goku and Vegeta have been missing out on all this stuff because they've been training in some kind of room of spirit and time-like room that exists within Whis' staff via a Photoshop filter. And since they're using the staff, Whis hasn't noticed Bluma trying to contact them. Some stuff with pizza happens and then they finally notice. However, because Goku can't get a teleport lock going, it'll take Whis 35 minutes to bring them to the battle. Aside from the details about the Magic Staff training room, this is all pretty similar to the movie. At this point, I've already gotten granular enough on everything else that I'm not going to harp on this, but Goku's teleportation can be frustrating. Sometimes knowing the location helps. Sometimes he can pick out individual ki regardless of what it's doing or whether it's from an active ki expenditure. In the movie, Bluma even calls out how ridiculous it is that Son-kun can't just sense Frieza from anywhere. Goku says it's too far away, maybe Beerus's plane of existence is spiritually removed in a way that makes it harder. In the movie, Bluma just tells everybody to power up to make it easier for him. It's fine. Whatever. In the series, this is Gohan's moment for pathos. It looks like he's powering up for a last stand, cursing himself for becoming weak enough that Piccolo would have to save him, stuff like that. But it turns out he's actually burning himself out to give his father and Vegeta a beacon. It's fine. Whatever. It's definitely not worth the transparent pandering of throwing in a Piccolo death scene, but in terms of giving Gohan a dramatic moment that ties into his character, it's fine. I don't have much to say about it. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it particularly elevates anything, but it's fine. Anyway, Goku gets there, he saves Gohan, he teleports Piccolo to the heavenly realm. I really wish I could have seen this from Dende's and Mr. Popo's perspective because, as far as they see, Goku just drops a corpse on their doorstep like a cat bringing home a bird. I find that to be hilariously macabre. But so they're not left with this horrifying and hilarious scenario, Goku sends Goten and Trunks out to explain to them why there's a corpse on their front lawn. And, that gets them out of the way. We can't have them cluttering up this dense and complex story. Oh, I forgot. Unlike the movie version, they show up during the Tagoma fight and contribute so little that it hasn't been worth mentioning. Oh, and finally, Vegeta rushes in to kill Ginyu. And that, as many of my viewers have suggested to me, something that I would never in a million years have even thought to consider, might very well be the aspect that's meant to appeal to fans. See, Vegeta killed every other Ginyu member during the Frieza arc, but he never killed Ginyu himself. So who cares if they don't have any kind of meaningful interactions, or that Ginyu's presence doesn't contribute to the narrative? Now Vegeta has collected them all. Now Vegeta's kill count has gone up by 1. Now people can fill in their lists of Vegeta kills and it has Ginyu on it. And that's cool. I could have had a story about a broken, twisted, tortured man taking out his trauma on other people. Who knows where that could have gone? It might have been entertaining. It might have been compelling. It might have been a moment we all remember, even over a decade later. Oh, but silly me, I forgot what was truly at stake here. Vegeta needs another tally mark next to his name. That's what storytelling is all about. It sure is wild that in the span of 2 episodes, this arc went from improving most aspects of an underwhelming movie to somehow doubling down on every bad element of it. That sure is lovely. What a fun note to end on. Thanks for watching. Please do the liking and the subscribing and the commenting and the helping me out on Patreon if you can. I'm pretty sure for once I'm actually on the side of the majority when it comes to these particular episodes, but I'd love to hear your opinions. We are largely done with the story at this point. There are only 4 episodes left and it's all Goku fighting Frieza. So I'm thinking we should wrap up the arc next time. If not, it'll definitely be the next one. There's not too much to talk about regarding this fight, but then again, I don't know if I would have believed I had 4 videos worth to talk about before it. But if this does go on for more than 1 video, there will definitely be a reason you can all get behind, because I can at least guarantee you that next time you will finally get the fashion extravaganza you've been waiting so patiently for. Ooh, how exciting.